What's up? What if that's how I open the video? Welcome back to the channel, guys. Music that makes one uncomfortable. I'm no stranger to that topic on this channel. If I had a pie chart of my channel, dark, uncomfortable music would be a pretty big piece. And recently that fun little catch-all term has been buzzing around up there. And it intrigues me more to find music that elicits this feeling of discomfort. But I didn't want to make a fucking spooky album video. We could save that for the end of October. I wanted to explore the spectrum of this emotion. The different ways that phrase, the one in the thumbnail, can be interpreted. So that is this video. I'll break it down into healthy, bite-sized chunks and present a spectrum of ways that I've found to define, interpret, and stretch the definition of discomfort. So let's hop right in, shall we? I think it's easy to find songs where the subject matter of the song is the uncomfortable part of the listening experience. But for this section, we're keeping it meat and potatoes, mostly instrumental, where it's not the lyrics or the storytelling that's creating this emotion, solely the music. And a piece that immediately came to mind for me when kind of laying out this criteria was a listening experience that I would say was less than favorable, and I guess depending on who you ask, they're either right there with me or they think I'm insane. Consume Red by Ground Zero. Yeah, I know. If I had a dime for every viewer that strongly recommended Ground Zero, I'd have a slightly unusual amount of dimes. I've always meant to give it a listen, but I never really found the time to dive headfirst into it. More like a diving headbutt. Joke. But I didn't take the leap until a friend of the show and real-life friend, Jackson Burns, requested it for my Patreon-exclusive review series about like a year or two ago. Thus, it was finally time to nut up. For those who are unaware, and I feel like that is not many of you, Ground Zero was a very famous experimental improvisational jazz group that was kind of the first early adopters of record scratching and playback as a live instrument. And of course, they're very famously known for a revolutionary Pekingese opera that is very renowned in the online music space. I had a passing listen to it a long time ago, but it didn't really sink in for me, unfortunately. I will most likely return to it, but we're going to talk about the record that is on my desk currently. Figuratively and literally, Consume Red. Y'all know me. Big album cover guy. This is fucking insane. I don't know what the fuck is happening. The colors are awesome, and it looks like a weird AI-generated image from fucking 1997. Another anomaly about this release is it's a single track. A single 57-minute track. The track is very repetition heavy, with this squeaky brass or like woodwind instrument looping constantly for the entire runtime of the song. And this is where my discomfort kind of came from. Noise and drone is like kind of weird for me. It's extremely hit or miss. And my favorite type of noise or drone music is where the track is constantly evolving, so it never stagnates. It's always a constant state of build. With that said, stretch that out to 57 minutes, the same screeching loop repeating, damn near jump scare stabs of harsh noise, and pounding drums and saxophones introducing themselves when you least expect it, sent me into damn near hysterics. I also neglected to mention the environment that I listened to this track for the first time in. My first listen to this album took place inside of a 95-degree car, I checked, in the middle of nowhere, 6 hours deep into a 10-hour road trip. By minute 30, I was convinced I was sent to literal hell. The track is insane, abrasive, industrial rock. I talk a lot of big shit on this album, but I've grown to appreciate it after my first horrific listening experience was behind me. But in my defense, my first time listening to this was not very ideal, or very ideal, depending on who you ask. And when I was listening to it back, preparing for this video, and kind of what you're hearing in the background right now, I felt this heightened sense of anxiety, like I was constantly bracing myself for a new section to appear and scare the shit out of me. The discomfort from this release came from my less than ideal, anxiety-filled first listen experience. That's my bad. That's on me. But what about when a musician is purposely trying to make you uncomfortable? Modern Jester by Aaron Dillaway. Where Consume Red was created to push the limits of the experimental improvisational genre, Modern Jester by Aaron Dillaway was created to push the limits of yourself, I think. Aaron Dillaway is the musician that in my head is slowly becoming my white whale. His work is noisy but subdued, electronic but analog, horrifying but also disarming. It's like a living contradiction of itself, and it fascinates me to no end. I've always wanted to make a standalone video on the guy. Still might one day. He's a noise music pioneer, a pivotal member in the famous experimental group Wolf Eyes, before leaving in the early 2000s for differences in life and solo career purposes, blah blah blah. If you were to ask me, his music is best described as anxiety bombs ready to explode. He creates music using analog tapes and tape degradation, a la William Basinski and the Disintegration Loops. Fun little callback to the channel. But while Basinski is looking to make a more melancholic and bittersweet atmosphere with his music, Dillaway's work is much more demented sounding, purposely creating tracks and live performances to generate this unease in listeners. From turning his screaming, writhing body into a musical instrument, to purposely playing a screaming baby sound effect for as long as he physically could.
What's going on here?
This is things no one wants to hear.
Because there is a bit of a horror thing in your work.
For a while, I tried to keep the baby tape going until someone would actually throw money up to me, but eventually I couldn't handle it anymore. Yeah, so I.
He says that with such joy. The guy's a fucking maniac. His work has this inherent horror element to it. I mean, just look at the fucking Modern Jester album cover. He understands this and works to make sure that the feeling of discomfort doesn't come from head-pounding chaos, it comes from fear. And with all that said, I think Modern Jester is the perfect encapsulation to everything I just said. Each track is like its own little condensed horror movie, but if it got chewed up and spit out by like a fucking trash compactor or something. Songs like Tremor and 8 Cut Scar use the looping, dirty tape machine that Dillaway makes music with to almost like lull you into a false sense of security, like it's hypnotizing in a way. Like, oh, this record isn't gonna be that bad, then it gets you. Other tracks like Look Over Your Shoulder, After the Shower, and my favorite track, or least favorite track, Body Chaos, just totally ignore the whole false sense of security thing and just throw you right into the uncomfortable anxiety as soon as the thing starts. And the feeling just gets worse and worse and worse until you're counting down the seconds until the track ends, only to get thrown right back into it as the next one plays. I'm a grown-ass man who wrote this at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I'm gonna be honest, I was kind of tripping in my studio by myself. Dillaway's noise music is designed to get this reaction out of you, and that reaction is whatever you make of it. Fear, stress, relaxation if you're crazy, all are correct answers for how Modern Jester is supposed to make you feel. And for me, the correct answer is discomfort. I feel like there's so much more left to say about Aaron Dillaway, so in the future, if the moment's right, I'd love to make a whole piece on him and his music. But in the meantime, I think he occupies a pretty decent spot in this video, and up here. Purposely painted with a large brush continues for this video. I talked about music that made me uncomfortable from anxiety and fear, but what if we look at the flip side of that? Instead of discomfort being a feeling to avoid, what about when discomfort is sought after for artistic and personal reasons? The discomfort, or should I say comfort zone, artists tried to escape when making music. The cool thing about music to me is there's like no rules. I mean, sure, there's like playing in key and scales, but like in theory, you can kind of do whatever you want. But for artists, bigger ones with frankly more to lose, the idea of being able to do anything gets to them, and they feel compelled to switch up their sound. Switching one sound becomes harder the more established you become. It's basic arithmetic. The artist and their audience become comfortable, knowing that they're the musician that they can count on for a certain genre, mood, or vibe when a new release is around the corner. But what happens when they're sick of it? The sound that they became known for, rich and famous for, isn't fulfilling them anymore. And they take that risk of escaping their comfort zone and growing. What do I even say about hip-hop legend Andre 3000? One half of Grammy award-winning duo Outkast, the secret sauce to any track he's featured on, and that one song that for whatever reason everyone insists on playing at drunk functions. I will never escape Hey Ya, I hear that shit in my dreams. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you how fucking awesome Andre 3000 is. He's so revered that hearsay and optimism about a possible Andre 3000 solo record has been buzzing for years, probably ever since Outkast broke up. But nothing. He stayed silent for all this time, till a few months ago. He announced his brand new album, New Blue Sun. Awesome, right? We got a brand new Andre 3000 solo album. Let's fucking go. Well, not quite. A lot of people were let down with this announcement because it wasn't hip-hop. It was, for all intents and purposes, an ambient flute album. Andre would say how it didn't feel right making hip-hop. He would try to force himself to, but it just wouldn't feel right. And with no rapping anywhere on the project, it would hilariously get this packaging sticker simply titled, "No Bars."
The album has, on the cover, it says warning. It says, as you see down here at the bottom of this, Jim, if you can get a shot, it says, warning, no bars. Andre 3000, Grammy award-winning rapper, why did you decide to have no bars?
It just came that way, and I thought it was beautiful without having any words. That said more to me in a way.
While comical, it's genuine. He wanted to let people know not to expect a hip-hop album out of this. When pressed about why experimental flute album, why no rapping, he just simply said it didn't feel right.
Many people will ask why a woodwind album.
I asked myself why anything. I would say it's probably this felt more real and authentic to me. I even try to jot down ideas and lyrics here and there, but none of that excited me. You know, it kind of felt like I'm trying to do a thing. You know what I mean? And I don't like when I'm trying to do a thing. It just felt inauthentic, and this felt like the realest I could be at the time.
Andre 3000 found himself essentially in a rut with his career. And he found this new genre to explore his creative side when hip-hop wasn't really cutting it anymore. While New Blue Sun isn't my favorite record that I'm going to be talking about in this video, I find myself returning to it more than I'd think. Specifically the first track, titled, and I'm not fucking around, this is literally what it's called, I swear, I really wanted to make a rap album, but this is literally the way the wind blew me this time. The album is more ambient electronic than anything, and something about that first track specifically just grounds me. I get the closest I think I physically can to being in a true state of meditation when experiencing the song. But again, I'm not really bumping this when I'm on my local paper route or I'm at the club. But that's kind of the whole point. That's not why Andre 3000 made it. He wasn't escaping his comfort zone to make a statement. He wasn't in his comfort zone while making music, and this record is what helped him find it again. Not for respect, money, or online people like me to dick ride him, but as a true artistic expression that he really doesn't care if you listen to it or not. He made it because he wanted to. And I respect the shit out of that. Being on YouTube, I feel like I've poisoned myself with content brain. Even when I say I'm not, I feel like I'm constantly trying to optimize for the algorithm. So seeing someone who never needed to release a solo album, didn't care if his core audience rejected it or not, and reinvigorated his love for music, promoting, and performing the album live is just like, that's peak life, honestly. Albums like New Blue Sun are what artists truly strive for. The last section I want to tackle is probably the most emotionally resonant, like goddamn, writing this was kind of rough, straight up. I've talked about albums where the sound of the music made me uncomfortable, and when the artist is looking to escape their comfort zone when making an album. But the last uncomfortable bullet that I wanted to hit on this topic spectrum is when the creation of the album is physically uncomfortable for the artist. What do I mean by that? Well, essentially it's where the creation of the album was physically uncomfortable, intensely uncomfortable for the artist. You'll see what I mean with my spotlight albums. I'm sure you can think of many albums that match this criteria. And that doesn't mean the two I highlight here are the only two that are allowed to qualify, but it's two of the most interesting to me and the two that yield, in my opinion, my favorite products. Artists who've been dealt very shitty hands, and instead of shutting down like the rest of us probably would, they channel that feeling into a body of work that transcends emotion. And one of the most famous examples where the creation of the album physically hurt the artist but still yielded fantastic music is For Emma Forever Go by Bon Iver. The legend of Justin Vernon's band, Bon Iver's debut project, For Emma Forever Go, is so synonymous with the creation of it, you can't really talk about one without the other. The legend goes, Bon Iver frontman Justin Vernon was hit with some pretty shitty life events. His band broke up, his girlfriend left him, all while he was very sick with a liver infection and pneumonia, leaving him essentially bedridden for 3 months. And he started feeling lost and confused, as one probably would. So to find himself, he went to a remote cabin that his father owned in Wisconsin. This quiet, reclusive, and isolated atmosphere, along with a new 60s guitar from eBay, were all catalysts to make almost every song off the album during this experience, which would become For Emma Forever Ago.
The record kind of started in my head. I was living in North Carolina, and I was really homesick, and I was also really sick. I had like a liver infection. And my band and I had broken up, and we've been playing music together for about 10 years. And that was very like disarming, and I was sort of beginning to wonder if music is kind of going to be out of the question. I was splitting up in a relationship at the time, and I wasn't working because I was so sick, and so I just kind of like retreated back home.
Vernon channeled these emotions and fought through the discomfort and literal physical pain to almost meditate on his issues and confront them in the form of a fantastic singer-songwriter folk album. For all intents and purposes, this is a breakup album. Not necessarily the one he was recovering from during the whole hurricane of shit, but his first love. And the album is admittedly about not being able to let go from one's first love, but working toward it.
Do you think people have made too big a deal about you making the record in this cabin and being in Wisconsin and all of that, or do you think it is actually important?
I think a record is something to be consumed and to be experienced by tons of people in different ways and in different lights. And context is everything for some people. Context isn't everything for other people. I mean, sometimes I'll get like bummed out if they just write something that's wrong.
What are some of the wrong things?
Well, a lot of people think that the record's about a girl and it's about the girl that I broke up with in Raleigh, and and it's whatever, it's not that simple. The relationship that I was going through in North Carolina it wasn't like the relationship that I think the record is about. It's about how people's first love, for instance, like mine, and how I never got over it. And I think that's what I was going through for a lot of years, and that's something I could never deal with.
I knew I wanted to cover this record for this video, and during the creation process of this video, I took a trip to New York City to essentially clear my head. And the reason I bring that up is because the first time I listened to this album was walking the streets of Manhattan and Brooklyn. The juxtaposition of these warm, raspy, and organic sounds of the record clashing with the industrial hustle and bustle of New York City was such a unique experience. It felt wrong, but kind of right at the same time. And as I was listening to this album, I entered a record store. And guess which album was fresh on the used record section as the thing is playing in my fucking headphones? Just what a release. Like, this thing is all the adjectives I said before and more. It's beautiful, haunting, and it's gonna sound cringe and really overused, but you can literally hear the pain in his voice. Songs like Flume do a great job of establishing the world that you're getting thrown into. Folky, minimal, and haunting. A super catchy and gorgeous track that's the perfect start to this album. Songs like Lump Sum bring up the energy slightly, with faster guitars and pounding drums. Right before you get slammed into one of my favorite tracks off the album, and apparently everyone else's, Skinny Love. Skinny Love is Bon Iver's most popular track in their discography for pretty good reason. The hook is catchy, the guitar playing is tight and raw, and the lyrics, really get you. Come on, Skinny Love, just last the year. It's rough, but fantastic, much like the album. The last track I want to spotlight is the titular For Emma. It's simultaneously the cathartic car crash of all the themes of heartbreak on the record, all accumulating and smashing together, but weirdly having this bittersweet vibe. Like, this person really affected me, but my head is up and I'm moving forward. Those fucking slide guitars and trumpets, man. Damn. Another one of my favorite tracks. I've loved Bon Iver ever since I heard 22 a Million. I think that record is sonically fantastic. And it could have easily fit in the comfort zone section of this video, but another day. It's insane that I could love both of these records with such drastically different sounds that came from the same artist. I'm not even a huge folk guy, but there's something about the rawness and catchiness and ironically comfortingness. Not a word. The album was made in the most uncomfortable of circumstances, both a physical illness and an emotional one. But Justin took that and he made a record that kind of says, yeah, this shitty stuff happened, but I'm still going. Put it behind us, and we keep going. Depending on who you ask, this album is either the worst thing to listen to during a breakup, or the best. I guess that's for us to decide. The final record I want to talk about in this section and in this video is a record that I never really appreciated when I first heard it. It had a standout or two, but the whole record wouldn't affect me as deeply until a little later in life. It's a very secretive record that no one at the time really knew was secretive. And knowing the situation the artist was in while creating it, it's such a brave and impactful portrayal of mortality. Blackstar by David Bowie. David Bowie's final album was released on January 8th, 2016. 2 days later, on January 10th, the world would learn he passed away at 69 years old from a battle with liver cancer. Blackstar would become Bowie's final message to the world. The jury is still kinda out on if Bowie created this knowing it would be his last statement. A close collaborator of Bowie during the production of Blackstar, Donnie McCallison, would say in an interview, "There's the narrative of Blackstar being his farewell, which I totally get, but that coexists with the fact that he was just so creative. He was planning on doing more. When I went to listen to the album at his apartment in November 2015, the idea came up of doing small gigs. It was going to depend on how he felt. We talked again in December, around the time of the musical, and he said he didn't want to. He was working on new music and wanted to record in January." So while the motivations behind Blackstar aren't exactly concrete, I think it's safer to say than not that David Bowie knew his time was limited, battling cancer for 18 months before his death in January of 2016. And Blackstar's production would start 1 year earlier in January of 2015. Probably not expecting Blackstar to be his last, but if it was, the lyrical content would act as it. Full disclosure, I have not listened to any other David Bowie albums. Trust me, after listening to this, they are on the list, but the list is very, very, very long. It's just kind of how it is in this line of work. I say this because I don't feel like someone needs to be an artist's walking discography encyclopedia to discuss how a piece made them feel. And boy did it. I alluded to previously that this record didn't really click with me upon first listen. Probably because I was young when I first heard it, but I did have some takeaways from the album, specifically Lazarus, to the extent I mentioned it in an old video. Only after listening to the whole album multiple times did the subject matter of Lazarus, and the entire album for that matter, really hit me. Like it all clicked for me at once. I think it's safe to say that Blackstar was one of the most potent emotional reactions I've ever had listening to an album, period. The experimental rock and avant-garde jazz of it was like brain melting when I first heard it. Essentially hearing it for the first time again, because I didn't remember any of this from my first. The insane borderline breakbeat drums on "'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore," the hard rock spoken word explosion of "Sue," and the truly catchy yet simultaneously bittersweet glam rock of "I Can't Give Everything Away." Dude, that fucking harmonica, man. These are all sounds that actually blew me away listening to it. Like, I can't believe this album sounds like this. And of course, the lyrical content is where I believe this record fits into discomfort and music. Even if this wasn't concretely supposed to be David Bowie's final album, the subject matter is almost too coincidental to overlook. Receiving devastating news of cancer has to put one's mind into a state of fear and discomfort, to put it lightly. Perhaps Bowie subconsciously took this news and instead of, for lack of a better phrase, shutting down, he took that feeling and translated it so perfectly into song. It's a musician. It's what he does best. And from close collaborators' accounts, he hid this illness very well and was nothing but a joy to work with. Themes of death and mortality are littered all over this record, like the titular Blackstar, with wailing choir vocals, smooth brass instruments, and Bowie's excellent vocals. Something happened on the day he died. Spirit rose a meter and stepped aside. Someone else took his place and bravely cried, "I'm a Blackstar. I'm a Blackstar." I've already discussed Lazarus in a previous one of my videos, but again, it's kind of the ultimate representations of the theme of death on this album. The haunting horns, deep rhythmic bass, and steady and building percussion is an eerie backdrop for Bowie to express some of the most overt lyrics about death on the album. "Look up here, I'm in heaven. This way or no way, you'll know I'll be free. Just like that bluebird now. Ain't that just like me? Oh, I'll be free. Just like that bluebird. Oh, I'll be free. Ain't that just like me?" A track that really affected me was "Dollar Days." Not just the emotional powerhouse of the soft guitar strumming and the ethereal piano chords, or the high-impact rock drums on the song, but specifically the double meaning of the line, "I'm dying to," a phrase everyone uses in everyday life. But the way he mirrors this saying with an alternative meaning, like the phrase, "I'm dying to do something out of excitement," but I interpret the repetition of this to be a morbid flip on the phrase. He's not just dying to, he's dying too. Yeah, that kind of fucked me up, if I'm being completely honest with myself. And I think that's why the bittersweet, almost pop song "I Can't Give Everything Away" was such a visceral reaction for me. Probably because the album didn't end on an extremely sad or somber note. If anything, the song, to me, sounds like, intentional or not, going out in a blazing solo. This whole video has been about discomfort, but for this song specifically, it wasn't uncomfortable. In a weird way, it was comforting. Blackstar is probably the closest I've gotten to giving an album a 10 out of 10 in a very long time. Just because of the sonics and the weight of the subject matter fitting together perfectly like puzzle pieces. I know this video is ending pretty heavy, but to kind of wrap up all my points, I chose the emotion discomfort for this video because it's a very versatile emotion, and it can be experienced by everyone differently. You know, in one sense, discomfort is a primitive reaction to terrifying noise and harsh loops, but discomfort is also something we as humans should want to seek, not feeling comfort with your position and wanting to genuinely evolve because you can't grow if you've never experienced discomfort. And in another, discomfort is taking rough news and tragic happenings and facing them head on, playing with the hand you're dealt and transforming that emotion into something beautiful, lemons in a lemonade, taking discomfort and finding comfort in it again. Sunrise, sunset.